Bryan Quillen. Thank you for joining the KEDC podcast. You're coming to us after a day of teaching at the Hub for Innovative Learning and Leadership in Fayette County. Wow. I'm sure you're ready to relax, and you've hopped on to tell us about your journey through deeper learning, vibrant learning, and cybersecurity, and a journey from English to cybersecurity. And I'm just really excited about bringing this content to our listeners because what you do every day is a good example of the vibrant learning that we're shifting to and innovative teaching and learning. And so I just hope that your conversation today inspires people to set up experiences for their students like you have and know that the rigor is not lost during the way.
I really appreciate
So,
the opportunity.
yeah. So tell us a little bit. Well, I've talked a little bit about you, but tell the listeners, how do you show up for students every day?
Well, it starts with an hour drive. I drive an hour every single day, and it gives me time to think and get myself together. But I try to come in every day with enthusiasm and excitement for what it is that I'm teaching. I found that my enthusiasm is contagious. And if I'm into something, then the students often are too. But I also try to bring creativity to it. If I'm having a good time, they're having a good time. If they're having a good time, I am. So we really just try to keep a really positive culture uh, to make sure everybody is ready to do the complex work that we're going to be doing.
So cybersecurity through gamification is
Yes.
what you get to teach every day. So why is this work important to you?
Well, cybersecurity is real. I've always been interested in technology. So since I was little, I've had a computer in my house and I've never really understood the stakes, I guess, that are there. But now we're all walking around with computers in our pockets. We're on our computers more than ever. Even our TVs are smart. So being able to make sure that our world is protected and getting students excited about that, that's just really beautiful to me. I think just becoming more symbiotic with the world around us.
As I was researching for this episode, I heard some students talking about the work that you do in your class. And from their perspective is I didn't realize that cybersecurity is something that I could do.
Yeah.
You're causing them to see themselves in this role. But how is this different than your English classes that you've taught? Because you have many years in English classrooms. So let's start there.
All right, 11 years of teaching English. English for me always was tied to these tests, and I was never a fan of the end of course assessments. So I tried everything in my power to make learning fun up to that point in the school year. I brought stories to life. I made sure that my students were engaged with the text and they could relate to the characters. And I mean, it's radically different than cybersecurity. We would always focus on a book, and I really would. I would turn them into these giant units that took over everything. And now we're dealing with computers, and the only texts we're reading are digital, but it's still about bringing that work to life. I would say that the discussions are a little less deep. And I do miss that. Talking about ideas and themes was just a beautiful experience with students as they're learning to grapple with the world. However, the conversations in cybersecurity are just different. We're talking about risks and rewards and the impacts that we're having on the world. And again, it's just more real. Not to say that a book doesn't teach human experience, but they have it in their pocket right now and they understand it. They love it. It is important for them to really grasp these complex things because it impacts them daily, more so than the theme of a book that might impact them in a particular situation, I would say. But man, I miss English, but not grading papers.
How do your students compare English and cybersecurity?
This group of students that I taught cybersecurity, I actually had also taught English to. So they were used to my projects. They were used to the insane way that I bring energy to the classroom. I think it became less about writing papers. That was such a tedious process because it seemed unnatural to have students organize their thoughts in this way, especially because their means of communication are all on their phone. So to shift and give them more tech-based opportunities to show their learning and express themselves, I think unlocked some doors for students and really opened up their eyes to the world around them in a way that I couldn't get them to see with a book.
Well,
Even if the book was wildly relevant, they want to be here. In English, they have to take. And maybe that's where it loses a lot of its luster, is that it's a requirement when they have a choice in the learning that they're doing, that really changes the entire vibe of a classroom.
It's a great point. Students, hearings from students and their perspective on and cybersecurity in particular, and learning about that, and not being able to really understand what they would learn walking into it. It's just so abstract, things that we don't see that goes on behind all the data and the devices that we use. I am not talking about this like I know what I'm like I know what you know. I just know enough to start the conversation and would love to learn more from you all. But so for someone like me who knows very little about cybersecurity, what would it be like if I walked into your classroom? What would your classroom look like, sound like, feel like? Can you just describe that for our listeners? What that would look like for a day or a week?
Okay, so let's say you walk into my class and we're not dealing with aesthetics. We're going to just deal with the way the class works. I have screens everywhere that show what I want students to learn. And I think that's kind of a big change is how much is immediately present in front of your face. And most students just think we're going to learn to hack. That is the most common thing I hear. That's why kids join the class. But it becomes very quickly about them. We talk about phones immediately because we have to talk about the digital footprint and the impact they're having on the world and how the things they say are archived and will follow them for the rest of their lives. It becomes kind of scary. When I do tours through my classroom, people will say, "Oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. That's terrifying."
Oh,
But my students will tell you that it's not. It can be scary if you don't know what's going on, but that's our job. Our job is to learn how to prevent that from being terrifying to people. So we really are just looking at things that we've been seeing our entire lives, but we've been ignoring them. The phones, the computers, the TVs, traffic lights, debit cards at restaurants, every single thing ties to my class. And I think that's just a really eye opening experience for everyone who walks through, regardless of their background. And I think it goes from there. I'm shifting the way students are thinking about the world around them, the way they're thinking about technology and data. And that sounds so boring now that I just said that out loud. Just to imagine data and numbers, but it tells a story in a very similar way that a novel would. It's
mm,
just our story and it has real impacts. And I think that's what my class looks like. It looks like a mind shift. It's also an awesome class and I never turn on the lights. So you got that kind of vibe going on. Let's see where you got
yes, we're in your classroom right
there
now.
are lights everywhere. It feels good. There's a whole vibe.
So when you're designing these learning experiences for your students, what are some things that you avoid?
So when I avoid rote memorization every time. I have never, even in English, I did not enjoy terminology. I could teach students ethos, pathos, and logos, the rhetorical appeals, and by the next week, it was gone. So I learned that that's not what I need to be doing. One of my admin told me that some people will teach what a hammer is. They teach you about the handle, they'll teach you about the metal part, they'll teach you the different kinds of hammers, the nails you could use. I put a hammer in kids' hands and I have them learn like that. They start hitting things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And once they hit a screw, they realize they need a new tool and we investigate that. It's very inquiry based. And I think if I front load that with definitions and things they have to remember, they become overwhelmed before we even start the actual learning.
Point. Very different than a lot of our traditional teaching is set up. So this probably takes you in a lot of different paths and avenues as you're giving that to your learners ahead of time without a lot of front loading. What are some examples of is there a time that your students' thinking and the experiences took you a direction that you didn't expect?
Always.
Oh,
I give students a lot of freedom once I say, here's what you need to show me that you understand. Most recently, we talked about social engineering. Social engineering is the way that you're manipulated into providing your data, whether that's a phishing email or somebody pretending to be somebody else. And these are really common things, and it seems pretty easy to thwart. And I think that's why people think it's silly. But I asked students to give me a presentation of one of these types of social engineering. And I had one group that started making their slides and they were good and it was boring and they were doing what they needed to do to show that they learned something. But then I had another group who saw that I got a new camera. It was just a GoPro, like a little tiny guy sitting on my desk. and they said, "Hey, can we use this?" Okay. I wasn't doing anything with it. So they picked it up and they started recording and acting some things out. And I noticed that several other groups started looking at them, and they were creating a PSA or a skit or whatever. It was a skit, but it turned into a PSA, and that caught like wildfire, and everybody wanted to have a part in creating their own video. I had students coming in dressing up. They were putting on accents, they were setting up scenes in the classroom, and that freedom allowed them to be creative and show what they knew, and it added in the extra skills of video editing and recording and scripting. So why not? Right? It's how it typically works.
Real life, authentic product with student
Yeah.
agents.
And then we used them. I shared the PSAs around the school to make sure that people knew how to avoid putting their passwords on post-its on their computer, which
Mhm.
happens way more often than we would ever expect.
Post-its, like the paper Post-its on their
Yeah.
computer?
Right there, as soon as you open it up, there's a password.
Okay, yeah. I do know that much about cybersecurity,
Hey,
keeping myself
see,
safe.
look, you know something. And I think that is another thing that students are hit with in my class. And like, why would anyone do that? Cool. You're already ahead. You know this piece.
Yeah,
So let's show somebody else how to learn that. And I think that really empowers students too. You have that knowledge. You just need to unleash it a little bit.
so you provide many entry points. This is
Yeah.
the flexible, responsive teaching that creates an authentic learning environment. Do you ever have anyone talk to you about your rigor or question the rigor of your class because of the creativity and the student agency?
When I was teaching English, the word rigor was thrown around more than any other word that I have ever heard. We had the Bloom's taxonomy. So are they understanding or are they synthesizing? So I always tried really hard to push that rigor, and that rigor had to go beyond memorization and understanding, right? So that's when I really got into the project based stuff because they're creating, they're applying, they're synthesizing. So in my class now, I've never once had anybody question the complexity of what I'm teaching because my classroom is toured by adults in our community all the time. And
Okay.
when I explain or I have students explain what it is that we're working on, blows people's minds that I have high schoolers doing this level of work. So if anything, it's wow, that sounds really hard, or I can't believe that's happening in a high school classroom. So kind of the opposite of questioning how low rigor is. It's how high can I get it?
Yeah, competency based and project based learning really does take it deeper a lot of times because of the students' involvement and excitement and engagement. Was what do you hear when your students are talking to people coming in your classrooms or talking to parents or community? What do you hear them saying about their learning that you may have not heard before in the past from students?
So I actually love that question because we had open house a few weeks ago, and one of the students who's an ambassador for my classroom was waiting up here for parents to walk in, students to walk in so they could share what we do. But he brought one of his friends, and his friend's also in my class, and he wasn't okay with waiting anymore. He went out into the hallway and started pulling people in. And the thing he said most often that became part of my pitch was that you don't have to know anything coming in. And he constantly says, I barely knew how to turn on a computer. And that's probably true. But this is the same kid who's now creating podcasts about the work he's doing, creating websites for the school. They are so confident. And I think that they don't even notice the confidence when they're talking to people, but they sound so self assured about their ability to investigate data or to code or to just think about intrusions like a crime scene and their ability to pivot from one piece of information to the next. And I think that might be why a lot of the adults that walk through the room say, wow, I can't believe they're doing this, because those project based experiences really are opportunities for them to ask more questions or learn something that maybe I hadn't intended for them to learn, but it
Yes.
became a natural part of what they needed to pull in for themselves. And yeah, like it's just so cool to see that explosion of excitement when they're able to light up and tell somebody else what it is they're doing.
I can hear the joy in your voice, even after a long day of working in the classroom. You're still excited and energized about what you get to do every day. And that's very inspirational. I'm sure that you have learned a lot when these things happen and you're like you just said, students take a different direction than what you expected. So are you comfortable learning and being vulnerable in front of students?
Absolutely. I love learning and I make sure that is the first thing students know. And the coolest thing about cybersecurity is that we're never going to be doing the same thing year after year. The technology's changing, the tools are changing, the attacks are changing, and it's real.
Yeah.
So it's not like I can't pull a book out from 1949 and pop it into class and talk about the themes. I have to constantly learn what's developing. One of the stories I showed today in class was 2 days old because a hacktivist took down a website that opposed their ideology. And we were able to have a philosophical discussion about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. So I love to admit when I don't know something because then I'll give the students that ability to be the expert and they can teach me and they can teach everyone else. And that helps build their confidence. It helps save me some time so I don't have to do all of the legwork. And it makes them the expert. So they're more willing to share that with people.
So you pull in other experts and partners in
Oh, all
this
the
work.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give our listeners an example of a few that you
The
work
most
with?
recent I had was a member of Microsoft. He deals with ransomware around the world and artificial intelligence and using that to strengthen data analysis tools. That was a lot. But what he did, he came in and he created a virtual machine or a copy of a computer essentially on all the students. And he allowed them to search. And they looked for hidden files, deleted files, password protected files because the scenario was there was an employee that was disgruntled and tried to delete everything. And my students had an hour to recover those files, put together a presentation, and share it with the CEO because it's real
Wow.
world. Every bit
Mhm.
of it showed their ability to navigate an operating system, use the tools I've taught them to find these files, and then maintain professionalism in a moment of anxiety. And he made that happen by creating an experience that I wouldn't have ever been able to. Similarly, I had the National Guard in, and they showed students how easy it is for Minecraft to open up an avenue for attack on their computers if you don't update. So they pulled in what's called a cyber range and plugged in a computer, and a student opened up Minecraft and started playing. And from the opposite side of the room, a student was immediately able to send a command in the game chat and then access the computer. So we were looking at data, and that actually inspired us to build our own cyber range. And that's happening this year because we want to have those kind of authentic experiences.
And you also you kind of got into this work with the group that we mentioned earlier, the KC7.
Casey's,
And so, for our listeners, can you just talk a little bit about how that partnership has um, just blossomed into what you get to do every day?
yeah. So KC7 is a non-profit cyber organization. The goal is to bring cybersecurity to people in underprivileged communities and essentially to make it accessible to anybody. Cybersecurity is a pretty hard field to get into. When I was a kid, I had no idea that it was an opportunity that was available. And that's often because of socioeconomic status or just availability. So KC7 creates games and they are all based off of real world scenarios, but they're fictionalized. And students or players, because it's everywhere, industry experts, professionals, people new to the field, students, they're able to read a story and start digging into data in order to make it make sense. So they're going to search for emails or websites that were visited that seem suspicious, and they're going to try to piece that together into a narrative so they can show how an attack happened, what the impact was, and so on. So 2.5 years ago, I was trying to figure out how to really get some of this boring content to stick with students because it's always going to be the case that data is
Mhm.
boring. So I put out an ad on Facebook. It wasn't really an ad, it was a request. And one of my friends mentioned that they met this person and they had a game. And with that, I scheduled a call, and within 3 days, and my students picked up this game and started running with it. At the time, it was a college level industry game. Um, and I had high schoolers that were absolutely smashing it. So the next day I sent another message and said, "Can I get another game?" So they set me up. And then the next day, I sent another message and got another. And these actually take hours. I had kids that were, for once, going home and doing work. And I don't assign homework. I hate it. I don't believe in it, but they were doing the work to the point where I would get text messages that says, "Oh my gosh, this kid's on there at midnight." So that became something my students were passionate about. They started writing their own stories. They started providing suggestions on how to make the platform more engaging for students or accessible. And because my students were going through it so quickly and I was providing so much feedback, they became a very natural partner for me. So I had them come into my class, I do video calls to talk about how the platform works, to help them brainstorm stories, to help them figure out strategies to get through the game. And that all transpired into us creating our own module for the platform and then hosting that at the STLP
Nice.
competition last year. And oh, it is last year now. And now I worked with a summer camp with middle schoolers that did this, and it blew my mind. So I changed the way I taught cybersecurity, and that led to me getting recruited for this job. So a crazy message on Facebook because an English teacher didn't know how to find business partners for cybersecurity, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Yeah.
And you get that hour drive back and forth every day, and it's worth it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It really is a tough drive to stay awake sometimes. But every day I get here and I'm excited to walk into the building. I'm excited to see my students. I'm excited that I have the opportunity to do this kind of work that I wasn't allowed to do at my last place.
So, in that vein, what are the conditions that you feel need to be present in terms of, I mean, you can elaborate policies, people, permissions to make this type of authentic, deep, vibrant learning happen
So
creatively?
trust 100% is what I need. I mean, we see it all the time in every classroom. Even when I was in English, I was the one with the English degree. I was the expert on the content. I was the expert on how it was supposed to be delivered, but there's so much red tape that stopped me from doing things in the way that I knew they needed to be done. Not just because of my ego and my love of English or my degree, but because I know my students. So being given the trust that I need in order to say, this is what's best for my students, this doesn't quite match. I need these permissions to do something that's a little risky. And then being told, well, you know what you're doing. Please try it out and let me know how it goes. I think that's it. And the willingness to take risks. I throw so many risks in there. Hey, all right, I'll find you. Um, yeah, you have to be willing to take a risk and stand up for what you believe when you know that your students need something. It's really important. So, for instance, when I was in my last district, I tried so hard to spend a bunch of money on something that the cyber range. Now, I've already talked about it, so we have context. It was really important for students to get that hands on real experience. So it's not just theory, but I wasn't allowed because there's a risk of putting students in that type of environment with a network. But there was no trust in the students. Maybe there was trust in me, but there was always the possibility that a student could do the wrong thing. One student theoretically ruined everything for me, but I know my student and I know that they need to get their feet wet or else I'm just talking to them. So I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I eventually got some concessions and got some of what I needed. But now I'm being given the opportunity to really push those boundaries, and my students are going to benefit from it. They're going to learn better than they're going to learn anywhere else. They are going to be more prepared for a job. They're going to be more prepared for college or industry, all because I was trusted to do the thing that I know is right for my student.
And our world can benefit from that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like, why make students wait until college or beyond, honestly, because a lot of the work that we do in cyber is so sensitive that you don't get your hands on it until you're already in a place of work. And then there's a steep learning curve. So my goal is to get students so prepared that they walk in and save that company money essentially because there's no training. They hit the ground running, and what can happen then? Like, how fast are they going to climb? How far can they go in their career because they started with enthusiasm at such a young age?
So, you are our first episode on an innovation spotlight category. of episodes that we are producing, and we're getting ready to launch a publication, Innovation Brief, and you're going to be spotlighted in that as well. But with your love for innovation and your experience that you've had in both settings, and we talked about comparisons, and thinking about the future, you're very future forward thinking. If we could check back in about 10 years from now, what do you think success in education for Kentucky would look like?
Success for education in Kentucky. I think it's symbiotic relationships with their communities. Being able to have people walk in from industry into an English class or science class and show students what they're learning is real. Because the most frustrating question any teacher's been asked is, when are we going to use this?
Oh,
And the answer is always, you're using it right now in my class, right now. But to be able to show them, here's when you're going to be using this, or here's the career you could do that would use this. I think that is so important to get people to show students that education matters. And while we want to scroll on a phone, we should probably find some way to flex that brain in a different way. But I also think that in a classroom, students should become teachers. I should be a facilitator. I should lead you where you need to go. But I want students to be doing the legwork. When something clicks with you, they need to be showing that off to other people, because the way they learn may be different than the way I presented it. And I think that creates a community of learning versus a sage on the stage is the phrase that's used. I love being able to teach, but I love it more when my students feel confident enough to do that. But it really becomes about trust. Standardized tests aren't real. I don't know when the last time you took a multiple choice test was, but like the last choice I had to make was where I wanted to eat, and nobody gave me options. I asked for options and I was not given. But I think project based learning is real. I think gamification excites students. I think being able to tie that to industry is so fantastic.
mhm.
So showing them that education's real and it becoming real because we're trusted and valued as community instead of being told that we just need to do our jobs and shut up.
It's a hard job, and what you just described and how many avenues your students can go with authentic questions and exploration, you will need a community when done correctly.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. I
we need to be able to reach out and pull in different experts when we don't know the answer.
Oh my gosh. That's actually, you asked me a question earlier, is how I show vulnerability with the learning. Like, I let students know, hey, I'm bringing this person in because they know this and I have no idea. But my goal is also to learn from them. So that's an
Mhm.
experience that we get to have together as we're learning alongside people from our community, whether those are the local universities or law enforcement or the College of Social Work, which is really interested in working together. There's a museum down the road that wants to work together. Any way that I can get students to connect with the people around them and see our work in the real world, I'm excited about it.
We can do this in every content, not just cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. When I was in English, I brought in people from the radio station to teach my students how to write arguments and advertisements. Uh, it's possible to connect learning to anything. We just need the opportunity to plan for those things, and we need to be encouraged to take risks.
Open our eyes in a different direction. So I'm excited about education in Kentucky and where we're going to go with innovation. And you are in this conversation a catalyst for inspiration. So I really appreciate you and talking to us about what you do every day with cybersecurity at the Hill in Fayette County.
Thanks so much. I really am excited. I love teaching, and I really think the way that we're moving, especially with a school like the one that I'm in, but also schools all around that are seeing that these kind of connections are really important. I'm just hopeful. And there was a time in education where I wasn't very hopeful. And there are still things that are scary, absolutely. But I think it takes the people that are going to hold fast and keep pushing.
Creating a world we don't even know exists yet, right?
Oh, absolutely. I know
Yeah.
that plenty. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.